It is a scorching sports summer, and you can make all your picks on Prize Picks. The WNBA and baseball are heating up with big tennis slams and major golf tournaments on the horizon. There is no better place for all your summer sports picks than Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Listen, the biggest stars in women's basketball are in the heart of their season. Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Leah Boston, listen. And there's no better place to run your game on the W than Prize Picks. That's America's #1 sports picks apps. We've got MVPs raising their game to new heights. We got a rookie class ready to take over, all while teams are fighting for playoff positioning like your Indiana Fever. So make a lineup with player stats, pick game winners, spreads, or totals, and combine your picks in the same lineup. All on Prize Picks, now available in all 50 states. So download the app today and use code PACE to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right, download the app today and use code PACE to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app.
This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Just staying on that topic of growth, one player that showed a lot of growth last year, Andrew Nembhard, stepped into a new role. Obviously, his role could be a bit different this year, or maybe going back to his, original type of role alongside Tyrese Haliburton. But how beneficial do you feel that last year was to enable Drew to be maybe more of that secondary ball handler, be able to free up, Haliburton, anything else that kind of goes into just the extra experience that he got last year stepping into a new spot?
For sure. Anytime you get that kind of responsibility put on your plate, regardless of how you play, there's going to be growth. And, you're going to gain confidence on the nights that you play well, and you're going to be humbled on the nights that you maybe realize, like, man, this is hard. Having this amount of, responsibility on my plate is not easy. But with Ty back in the mix this year, it allows Andrew to step into the foremost nights and have a little more of an edge to him, because now he doesn't have the best player on the best perimeter guy guarding him, which should embolden him a little bit because he doesn't have the top defender harassing him the entire game. And I think that'll help with his confidence and who he is as a player. And Andrew's always been a very confident player, but to have that put on your plate and that type of responsibility and expectations to be the guy to run the team and be the primary handler every night helps with the player's growth. And Drew had, there were some ups and downs last year. I think he knew that was going to be the case. But Drew never lost confidence. And I think the amount of experience he got in that kind of role is only going to help him next year, next to Ty. And if Ty's out for certain games and he has to slide over into that position, it shouldn't be a pretty seamless transition for Drew this year.
So when it comes to building a team in this new CBA, it's all about getting the right players with the right contracts. I know that's one thing you guys talked about when you went after Ivica Zubac as a starting center, but we saw it just last season where you guys extended Aaron Nesmith. There's about 8 or 9 guys that are up for extensions this offseason. Is the plan to try and extend any of these players, specifically, Shepard and Walker, who we just talked about?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who are eligible for it. We're talking through a lot of things of that nature right now with players' representatives, and but there's rationale for doing some. There's rationale for waiting, and it's got to be the right situation for both sides. We're not completely opposed to it, but it's got to be, like I said, it's got to be the right deal for both sides, both parties, and we've got this team kind of locked up together for another 2 years. There's a lot of things that we haven't seen yet with this team to know. We're optimistic that things, fit well together, but, what does it look like when it gets on the court? Do you want to, for sure, to commit to things long-term or longer term without seeing this team together? Or, you keep this team together because it's a good group and you like the fit. So, it's a debate we've been talking about it all year, in our offices. And, obviously we love these guys, for a lot of reasons. But there's also, we want to see what this group looks like a little bit too on the court to decide, is this a group that's going to be the right fit moving forward?
The thing that we haven't seen is Big Zoot with this core group, in specific Tyrese Haliburton. How has it been behind the scenes having him kind of gel with this group? I know obviously it's the off season, but from like, just a culture fitting in type of standpoint with this group, that's what we haven't seen. How's the early signs been behind the scenes?
It's been very encouraging. He's been a very easy guy to get along with, to connect with. Our players have really, bonded with him pretty quickly. He's an easygoing, personable guy who knows the league. He knows our team. He knows the NBA. He knows, restaurants to go to on the road. He knows, players around the league. So it's a guy who's just got a lot of experience being in the NBA, and he's got a lot of relationships already established with his teammates here, and we've been following him with his national team overseas, and we've had staff go over there to see him and spend time with him, and he's an easy guy to want to be around. It's not a it wasn't a difficult transition. From our end, I know for him being with the same team for a long time, I know it was hard for him leaving the comfort zone of where he was at, and he was beloved there by the Clippers and their organization, their fans, and but I think he'll be beloved here as well, and I think he recognizes that, and he values the same things that we value as an organization. He's an unselfish guy who, wants to play winning basketball. It's not about himself. It's not about his stats. It's all about winning at this point in his career. And he recognizes, he's going to have to adjust to our style of play. And I think that's a big emphasis for him with his off-season training. And he knows we're in a team that's trying to win right now. And that's what he was looking for. And I think our guys have embraced him, and our coaches have embraced him.
You talk about him adjusting to the style of play that you guys play, but stylistically, quite a bit different from what you had with Miles Turner just 2 years ago. So, how much of what he can do great that doesn't maybe fit in stylistic with your team do you want to see him, add to this group with what you guys do, just be more versatile? And how much do you maybe want to see him be more of a floor, spacer? Could he potentially start shooting more threes? I'm just kind of curious how you're envisioning, mixing both styles and how that can kind of help you guys.
Yeah. Obviously, his strengths of his game are different than Miles's strengths, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because there's things that Ivica brings in regards to the rebounding, the defensive paint protection, the screening, the passing, that make up for maybe the lack of 3-point shooting that he hasn't been able to show up to this point. Whether he develops that immediately, I don't know. Obviously, Rick is a brilliant coach who's going to be curious to see what can I bring out of a player that maybe is hiding in there. I think Rick and our coaches will maximize whatever he is capable of doing. But our team, obviously, I think the perception is that we play fast, which we make quick decisions, I think, is a better way of saying that we play fast. And I think to make quick decisions, you got to be a very smart player. Ivica says, obviously, he's not a gazelle running up and down the court, but I wouldn't say Miles necessarily was either. But I think the decision making, the screening, the physicality that he brings is an element that'll be, very much welcomed by our group. And I think it'll, take some time for him to adapt to our play style or defensive coverages, things like that, because every team does things maybe a little bit different. But his intelligence is off the charts. And I think that's something that our coaches really, really value. And I think you'll see that being a great fit with our group.
Can't wait to see him with this group, but a player that I can't wait to see back is Tyrese Haliburton. This whole entire fan base just cannot wait until Ty is back out there on the court. But you mentioned earlier, if he's to miss some games, is there any sort of set plan to say early on, hey, we're going to have him on a minutes restriction, or perhaps maybe not playing back-to-backs? Is there anything that you could reveal that could be in place to start the season, at least for Haliburton?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to our medical staff and Ty on that, how he's feeling once we get to the start of training camp, and how things go early in the season. But, I think Ty's expecting to be full go from day one and expecting to be himself right away, which would be great if he is. I think we all realize, hey, it's going to take him some time to get back, to get his legs under him and get his feel for the game back. I mean, it'll be 16 months since he's played an NBA basketball game, which is a long time to take off. And there's good pieces of that come into play, because it allows his body to really rest and recover. But it's also, you lose the rhythm of the game. You lose, some of the feel that comes with getting into the flow of an NBA season. But as far as, restriction limitations, I don't think that's been determined yet. I think that'll be, dictated by how he's feeling and how his body responds to getting back into full bore action.
What is one area that you've seen Tyrese, maybe improve on during this time of rehab? And what are you hoping to see from him, I guess, this next year in terms of just the whole health standpoint? Because this is now a couple of times where he's dealt with some unfortunate injuries. And so, how do you kind of build him up to just maybe be a little bit more durable?
Yeah, I think the durability part, I think one of the things that you'll notice that only is that he's gotten stronger. His body looks stronger. I think he's had time to work on adding some muscle, adding some pounds to his body to allow taking some contact that he takes as a primary ball handler. You're running, pick and roll, plays both on the offensive side and you're defending on the defensive side over and over in an NBA game. And that takes a pounding on a body. And I think Ty realized, hey, I need to get myself a little stronger to withstand some of this physicality that I, get from taking hits. And now I can maybe add a little more strength to maybe deliver some contact when I have the ball in my hands. So I think that's been an emphasis for him and his group and our coaches as he's worked on different areas of his game. It was always going to have the competitiveness to want to just kind of like rip your heart out, at crunch time. And I think that's still going to be there with him. His confidence is, never going to be something that you're worried about with him. And I think he's just dying to get back on the court to play. I mean, I think this has been, a long process for him to go through. He's battled not just the injury, but the shingles too. And I think he's ready for the season to get here and get back out on the court. And I think that's the thing that most matters. I think he is ready to get back out there.
How important was is it to the front office to keep this core intact? We've heard about, the core seven, if we want to call it, but just like we want to keep this group that went to the NBA finals, that took, the Thunder to game seven, to be able to give them another shot together, even, despite everything that happened last season.
Yeah, I think as a decision-making process for us, you get, like you said, you get that close to winning a championship. Is your decision making, heading into the future, do you just blow it up? You just say, hey, it didn't work, and let's just move on. Let's build a new team. That didn't feel like an option at all to us because we were right there. This group fits together. They've got great chemistry. They have a style of play that they've established. They have rules that guys have established and have all embraced. That's a big challenge in our league is getting guys to really buy in and thrive in their role. And we felt like this group has really kind of established that. And as we looked at our options, do we, you know, tweak the roster? Do we make massive changes to the roster? Do we become more top heavy? Do we become, gut our depth, become like a more top heavy team? Is that the path? And as we analyze all these different options and talk to as a group, we just felt like this group has earned the right and deserves a chance to run it back and see if we can, reach the ultimate goal. It's like I said, the formula has been proven to be successful. Now, does it just carry over right away next year? It may not. There's no guarantees of that in the NBA, but we would rather take the chance on something that felt right and was established than to try to, tweak and get cute with the group and make a big change or make multiple changes because I think this group deserves another chance together.
Yeah, and you might not be able to answer this, and I apologize for that, but when you kind of evaluate, like, is this working? Is it not working? How much time do you give? Because obviously the trade deadline, it's a little bit past halfway point of the season, but is that really a fair assessment of a team that's trying to figure out some new additions as well as Haliburton coming back from an injury? Is that a fair assessment? Say, hey, we're not really where we want to be. Maybe we do need to change this core up. How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, I think that all depends on, what's the health of the roster? How have guys been performing? Are players no longer a fit? Are they not embracing their role? Is a new player not a fit? There's lots of things that will reveal themselves as you get through 50 games or 55 games at the trade deadline to know that for sure. It's hard to say that, hey, let's get the trade deadline. If it's not working, let's just blow it up, because we've seen, our team get off to slow starts and we kind of build momentum. And that's been the identity of Coach Carlisle's teams with us is we play better as the season goes on and have played our best basketball as you get late into the season. And there's still always going to be that, thought in our mind that, hey, this team can always get it going. And like we've seen them do it And so we're not going to overreact to a slow start or a bad month maybe. But there's just a lot of information that'll go into making that decision come trade deadline time.
Chad, if you look around the East, there was a lot of moves done this offseason. A lot of big names switched teams. Is there ever a drip of sweat maybe coming out of you or KP's forehead to say, we got our work cut out for us? Or are you saying, you know what? Last I checked, the East kind of goes through Indiana when we're healthy.
I mean, there's a drip of sweat every season, I think, for every executive. So, uh, even if some of these changes wouldn't have taken place, you still would have, you got a lot of respect for a lot of these teams in the East. There's some good teams. Like you mentioned, there's been, a couple of new players that have moved around, a couple of players that have come into the East. And I think you're looking at a very, very competitive Eastern Conference this year. And obviously, New York is the team to beat. They're the champs, and they proved themselves, and they had a great year, great playoff run. And there's several other teams that I think, I was thinking about this the other day. There's probably 11 to 12 teams in the East that if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be very disappointed. And, a couple years ago, that maybe wasn't the case. And I think the East has gotten more and more competitive. I think, the lottery reform is going to, also adjust teams. They're going to be trying to win. So I like it. I think the competition is great for the fans. I think it's great for the league, the health of the league. I think it's great for players and their growth and development. And, where we stand in the mix, I don't know yet. We have some new pieces. We have Ty coming back, but I think if we can get ourselves healthy and find our identity again, that, we have a real chance to play with anyone.
Somebody that was a huge part of your, team that made it to the NBA Finals was Obi Toppin, and I think that people kind of forget about just how important his role was off the bench. Played small ball five in a lot of closing lineups as well, and just growing in that area. But last year missed a significant amount of time with that foot, surgery that he had. So, what did you see from Obi when he came back from that injury, and the goal to get him back for him to be healthy for the offseason? And what kind of role do you see for him?
Yeah, I mean, we love Obi. I mean, Obi is such a big part of not just our identity as a team, but our ecosystem, the personality of the group. Um, he brings a joy to the gym and to every practice, every meeting, every dinner. He's just got an infectious way to him that just breeds positivity into our group. And I think, coming back from the injury last year, it'd been easy for him, to say, hey, our team is not very good. We're not winning games. Why do I want to come back here and risk, playing and getting injured in games that really are where our team does not have a chance to make the playoffs? But he was motivated to come back. He wanted to get back as soon as he could. He's a guy who just loves basketball. He loves being on the court. He loves being around his teammates. He loves being a pacer. And so, it took him a little while to get going. But once he found his groove, I thought that, Obi settled back into the Obi that we, had seen, the year before. You mentioned his versatility to play some center. I think that is, valuable, asset and tool for our coaches to utilize. There's certain nights where we put him at the five, and you just got a really, really fast team that can really shoot. And so I imagine you'll see some lineups this year where he's at the five, and expect him to have another great year for us. And just love him as a person. Number one, like I said, he's a great fit for our basketball team too.
Pascal Siakam was someone who absolutely shouldered the load last year, was an all-star in what was, a tougher season, which is rare to see in the league. That just shows that there's a lot of respect for his game. When you add Zubac and Haliburton back to this mix, how does it feel that it could lighten the load for Pascal, where maybe he could, I don't know, have it a little bit easier to get some easier baskets instead of, the amount of double teams he was able to draw last year and still be able to produce?
Yeah, I think the 82 games probably felt like about 200 games in Pascal's mind because there was a lot on his plate. He took a lot of, pounding, it's from having that responsibility we kind of talked about with Drew. It takes a little more toll on you physically and mentally when other teams are just doing everything they can to make whatever minute you're on the floor as miserable as they can for you. And, Pascal's a pro. Like he's dealt with that responsibility in the past before. And I thought this year, he really shined in a team that was having a lot of struggles, health wise, and he was there every night. There's nights where it's easy to be like, "Hey, we're 20 games under 500. What's my motivation tonight?" But his motivation is he just loves competition. He loves basketball. He's the type of guy who I think if he could play, 365 games a year, he would do it. He doesn't want to miss games. He just loves being out there on the court. He's like I said, multiple times talking to you guys. His evolution as a leader, as a voice in our locker room, has been one of the more impressive things that I've seen in my time here with the Pacers. Is how he came in here, very established player, but a new team, a new locker room, and he quickly found his voice and his niche within our locker room. And when he speaks, it's a very, very powerful message, and it's a message that everybody in the locker room is listening to and hanging on every word. And I think he knows that, and he takes that responsibility. He does not take it lightly, and I think he knows that this team needs his voice. And he's taken some of our younger players under his wing. He had Jarris down working out with him at his house in Orlando last week, and he takes pride in passing along a lot of his experience and knowledge onto younger players. And I think he's primed to have another great year for us.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell last year, especially in some of the post-game press conferences, with the losing kind of taking a toll on him, he would just every once in a while just kind of sound off about we can't establish these habits. And I think moving forward, it's going to be a big thing this year is to kind of just try to erase what happened last season and just try to get back to those championship level ways. But I want to talk about Aaron Nesmith because last year it was really a bigger role for him. There was times he was playing with no point guard out on the court, really, or not a lot of experienced point guards out there to getting an elevated role, and then he had that crazy, scary injury in Phoenix. It looked like it could have been worse, and thankfully only missed 4 to 6 weeks, I believe it was. So from what you saw from Aaron last year with a bigger role than coming back from that injury, and we already know what he did with the team healthy, but how do you think he grew on and off the court last season just going through all this?
I would say with Aaron, his strength in our system is very defined in what he does. And last year, when he was playing, it was an opportunity for him to try to, kind of test some things that maybe he wanted to see if he could do. Could he become more of an attacker off the dribble? Could he create his own shot with a little more regularity? And I thought there was growth and signs of that at times. I think we won't be asking him to do a lot of that. Once hopefully if we get everybody healthy and back playing our style of play, and he settles back into being who he is, which is just an absolute pit bull defender who can knock down shots, who can drive against a closeout. I think those simple things are what makes him so valuable to us. And I think, he's a guy who he wears his emotions and competitiveness on his sleeve. And whether you're, in the NBA finals or you're, have 19 wins, he's competing at a high level every time he steps on the court. And I didn't see, any drop in that limb last year, despite the challenging year we had, and which I enjoyed, like seeing guys. You enjoy seeing how do people respond in the season like we had last year, not just players, but, staff. How do they work together? How's their attitude? How's their outlook every day? And, Aaron was just another example of a guy who just brought it every single day, despite, the season that we had last year. And I expect him to pick up where he left off, before we went through last year.
There's someone who's known to bring it every single night, but someone who's also known to be counted out every single year is TJ McConnell. I felt like McConnell was able to an extent, stay a little bit fresher last year. Like, despite the injury to Tyrese Haliburton, felt like McConnell's minutes weren't, extended to a point that would have been, kind of overdoing it. How do you feel about TJ McConnell coming into this season, knowing that it's like, yeah, he probably was able to be a little bit more fresher than in years past?
Yeah, I think as you get up in age, everybody's going to start to wonder when's your drop off going to start. And TJ is very well aware of people feeling that way about him. I think that's what drives him every day when he gets out of bed, and he thinks about the people who are doubting him, and they doubt him for different reasons early in his career. Now they're doubting him because of his age now, and he's just a guy who he's very fueled to prove people wrong, which a lot of our players in our locker room are. But he's a great example of that. I think he knows that this team needs his energy. They need his scoring punch. They need his energy defensively. They need his emotion. That's a huge piece of our team, and especially off our bench. I mean, he's really the engine off our bench most nights, and he knows he's got to bring it. And I think he's motivated to have a great off season to get himself in the best shape he can be in. He's battled a few, nagging injuries here and there in recent years, but I think he's a guy who takes very good care of his body. and has a lot of pride in, how he plays and how he performs. And he wants to be a positive for the team every time he steps on the floor. You see it when he feels like he's not playing well, that corner of the bench, the scores table, there's probably like a fist, indented right there into that padding from when he comes off the floor and he's upset that he hasn't played well. I think there's a TJ McConnell handprint there from him slapping the table. But we love his fire. We love his emotion. He's got a unbelievable care factor about wanting to do well, wanting to perform for our fans. And that's never, ever going to waver with him.
As you look at this team now that you've got it pretty much, all in place for the most part, do you see an area of weakness maybe that you would like to improve upon at some point, or just see from internal growth, or, maybe some areas of strength that you might not have had heading into the offseason?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Alex. I think I was worried about, do you have enough depth? I think from our job as a front office, if we put enough good players in place for our coaches to build a deep team, because that's important with our style of play, is to have depth. And you're always worried, do you have enough? We made a trade where we gave up Benedict and Isaiah and brought back Zoot. So you lost, one of your players in your rotation. So that maybe hits your depth a little bit. Have we added enough depth, in the front court? Is Jay and Larry, can those guys, if Zoot were to go down for some reason, or do we have enough depth there at the center spot to sustain our way of play and success? Those are the things that, we worry about when it comes to, do we have enough quality players to play the way we want to play and to wear teams down? From a standpoint of what do we have now that maybe we didn't have before, I think we have some physicality on our team. I think obviously Zoot brings some physicality. I think Kelly brings some physicality that'll be helpful for us in a playoff series. I think this year's playoffs showed us, it was a physical game. A lot of these playoff games, and I think having those two guys added to what we have already will help us. I think that's a big reason why Ty tried to get stronger and more physical as we watched the playoffs this year. You got to be able to withstand some pounding, and you got to be able to deliver some pounding. It's not just taking it. Can you deliver it to the other team? And I think this team hopefully will have that element to it that maybe we didn't have as much of in the past.
Is it like going without saying that this entire group is bought into championship or bust this year, given, how painful maybe last year was, in addition to obviously that Game 7 loss? Like, I think that there's very few teams, I think maybe even we've talked about it before, very few teams that go into a season expecting to win a championship. Is it safe to say that this team expects to win an NBA championship?
That's a good question. I think with where things ended, 2 years ago, there's disappointment because you felt like you were right there and you had an opportunity and it didn't happen. And so, it's hard to say it would be a disappointment if you don't win a championship this year, because there's things that could come into play that, prevent that from happening, that are, you could still be a successful season. I think our players, if you were to ask them, they expect to be competing for a championship. And if they're not, I think if we're healthy and we're not competing for a championship, I think there'd be disappointment in that regard. But I've always taken things, I know it's easy to look at the very end result ahead of time. I think one thing we pride ourselves on internally is just a day by day approach. And wherever that takes you is where it takes you. If you get ahead of yourself and looking too far down the road, you're going to miss some steps and you're going to have some, failures along the way because you're not looking at what's right in front of you and where your feet are at. And that's the reason why we made 2 great playoff runs, is because we weren't looking too far ahead. We were looking at what's the next thing in front of us from day to day. And if you take that approach and, at the end of the day, we look where you're at, lots of times you're going to be pretty happy with where things ended up. So I don't want to go in this season saying it's championship or bust. I think it's taking each step, each day, with a growth mindset, and let's see where that takes us at the end of the day.
So I don't want to dive too much into this because we're just talking about a championship, but you did say that, trading last year's draft pick to get this year's draft pick back, you end up losing that pick, but you did acquire Zubac with it. You kind of look at the youth pipeline here, trading Mathurin, who was also a former, top 6 pick. What do you think about where your current, roster's at from a youth standpoint? And how do you kind of, value these picks moving forward that you guys do now have that you could trade, or even some that are outgoing?
Sure. I mean, it's you hope to, in an ideal world, balance having success now and the potential for success long term too. That's not always something you can do. I think this team right now has a window here of if it's 2 to 3, 4, 5 years to try and compete at the highest level we can. And it's not about building for the future necessarily. So, we've maybe sacrificed having some young players that are going to be long term pieces for us in order to compete for, a championship in the short term. And, I think it's hard to do both. It's hard to balance both. And, at some point, this group, this iteration of this team, it'll run its course. It's just the nature of the NBA. It's the nature of pro sports. At that point, you reevaluate where does this team, what's our next direction? What's our next, process that we want to put in place to build the next iteration of this team. But in the short term, I mean, we feel like we have a group here that's proven it can compete with any team in the league. And shame on us if we don't want to try to maximize this window. It doesn't come just to everybody. It's not just a given that, hey, you paid your dues, you get this opportunity, you either win or you don't. The door is open right now, and I think we'd be disappointed if we didn't try to maximize this window right now by putting win now players around this group.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just want to say for any fan that's listening to this, you guys are currently a luxury tax paying team. So you guys are paying the tax heading into the season, and you are hard kept at the first apron, which means you are not legally allowed to go into the first or second apron. So when people are saying, why don't I just go into the first, second apron? You guys legally cannot do that. So I just wanted to clarify that for you because I know that's been a lot of the pushback I've seen from fans that don't understand the craziness of the cap. But I think that's just something that I wanted to put out there because you did say that this team would be willing to go into the tax if they felt like they get the right player. And so I'm guessing, is Kelly Oubre kind of the right player to go into the tax for?
Yeah, I mean, that's our ownership has made the commitment that this team is right there on the doorstep of competing for a championship, and gave us the green light. That hey, if we're ever in position to be in that spot, that if it takes going in the tax to add to the team, then let's do it. And we're very fortunate that ownership has made that commitment. And like you mentioned, we can only spend so much by the rules. If we could spend more to add great players to it. Where the team's at now, I think we would, but the NBA rules just don't allow it with the new aprons, and we could probably add maybe one more equipment manager, and that's about it on our payroll, and without being out of the rules with the hard cap. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, we've spent as much as we almost possibly can under the NBA CBA rules, and Kelly was a player that we felt was worth it, to add to the depth of our team.
We talked about it a little bit earlier, but Ben Shepherd shot the ball really well the second half of the year. Jarris Walker, really good second half of the year. Andrew Nembhard even had a really good second half of the year. Is there someone on this team that you feel like could take that maybe significant leap next year? Because I do feel like we saw like a tale of two halves for many players last year. Is there someone that maybe you feel by the end of next season could take that jump?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm hoping I don't know if it's one in particular. I'm hoping it's a combination of several of them that maybe don't make a massive jump, but they all make a good stride with where they're at. That they become efficient. I think our young guys becoming more efficient. You mentioned Shep, you mentioned Jarris. Those guys being efficient in their roles would be a big step for us. It may not look like a big step in their stats at the end of the year, but it would be a big jump in what they do for our team. And I think Tyrese, Andrew, Aaron, Zoo playing a new system could be, who knows what it could look like with Zoo. I mean, playing with Tyrese, can maybe unlock a different element to what he can do as a player. Tyrese has tended to have that effect on centers. And so hoping that maybe Zoo, there's a big jump in what Zoo becomes as a player too. I mean, he's obviously been in the league for a long time. That very rare that a guy at that stage in his career makes a big jump, but it's a new system. It's a new teammate he's playing with. And that teammate, tends to make the people around him look pretty good. So hoping they all make a big jump.
That would be great. That would be great. So, Chad, we appreciate your time. We know we've gone about an hour long here. So, have one final follow-up question here as we kind of wrap things up. I know the last couple times you've been on, you've been able to kind of give us a story of maybe something that happened behind the scenes that we weren't able to, be there for. I always go back to Benedict Mathurin when he was out with the injury, making the cookies and all the baked goods for the guys and things like that, trying to be involved. So kind of on the spot, so I do apologize for that. But you should know these questions are coming. So is there anything behind the scenes, maybe story-wise this year that would be maybe encouraging for fans to hear, just cool for fans to hear?
Oh man, I think it's just the overall. If you were to be around our team last year, if you were to walk into our locker room in February and we were, gosh, I don't know what our record was then. It wasn't good. And you were to spend a day with our team and our players and our staff, you never ever would have imagined that our record was what it was. Because credit to Coach Carlo and our coaches and to all of our players for maintaining the culture that we have in a season that was just sucked. I mean, everybody across the board would tell you that was just, it was no fun, but we went through it together. We maintained, a great spirit to our team. We maintained great chemistry, camaraderie. And I give credit, like it's easy to always go back to Ty, but here's a guy who's not going to play a single game last year. He's not going to practice last year. He's at every practice. He's at every game. He's traveling with the team. He's at dinners with guys. And I've just seen so many examples of players, especially a marquee player, when they get hurt, they just kind of they go out of sight, out of mind. And, I give him a ton of credit for staying 2 feet in on a team that he was never going to be able to step on the court to help with. And, I think it's one of those seasons where you learn a lot about people and you hope that it becomes, a season that provides some positives for the next season. And, I know Coach Carlo getting his 1000th career win, was a big deal. And that kind of got overshadowed because our team wasn't doing well. We here's one. I don't know if Coach Carlo want me telling you this, but I'll tell you anyways. We had he was at 999 career wins, and we proceeded to go on like a 13-game losing streak. But we had Jay Huff's wife, who's a brilliant, talented artist. We had her commissioned her to draw a painting that we were going to present to Coach in the locker room after we won the 1000th, after he got his 1000th win. And we had our equipment manager, Zach Eagle and Cole Petritz. We had T-shirts made that said, 1K wins, congrats. And we envisioned, okay, we win game, his 1000th win. He's with his coaches doing their, post game huddle before he comes to the locker room. He walks in the locker room and everybody has the shirts on, and we got the painting that Jay's wife has presented to present to him. Well, he gets to 999. We got everything ready for the next game. We lose. We lose the next game. We lose the next game. We lose the next game. Now we're on the road. We're traveling with this painting and this box of shirts, and we keep losing. We keep losing. And it got to the point, I think we were like, oh man, we'd probably lost like 11 games in a row. And our equipment manager's like, should we keep traveling with this painting of these shirts? And I said, let's just, I don't know if Rick's even wanted us to celebrate it after this point. So we ended up not bringing them. And it turned out to be an awesome deal though, because every year we have a trip where we take all the moms with us on the road, and we do Karen Atkinson and Jasmine Smits and Michael Hornbeck, our player program staff, do a great job of doing all these activities on the road for the moms. And they get us, spend the road trip with their son, and it's really a cool deal. And then we do it with the dads, and we had a dad's trip to Charlotte. And so our group of dads, were really tight. Our players' fathers are really close. They got to be really close during our playoff runs. And so, those guys, they go on the dad's trip and they don't want to hang out with their sons. They want to hang out with each other. And so we end up getting the 1000th win on that trip. And so we brought all the dads into the locker room to celebrate his 1000th win. And I'm like, this is better than any T-shirt that we could ever do. Just having all the families in the locker room to celebrate his win. It was one of the coolest moments I've experienced in my time in the NBA. And just seeing, Coach to feel the relief of finally getting that win after being on the losing streak, and to do it on the road with all the families and their dads there and the players celebrating them. Was like, there's certain moments in a long season that, regardless of how the season's going, are very memorable. And that was one of the coolest moments of this season.
I love it. This is what we love the most, is hearing these in-depth stories that you can't get anywhere else. So, Chad, we really appreciate you coming on. My last thing for you is just give us one thing that this entire fan base can expect from this team coming off of, like you mentioned, a tough year last year.
I think they're going to be very, very motivated to bounce back and prove that, hey, people have kind of written us off, I feel like, already. We're kind of a forgotten team in the NBA. We're not involved in the LeBron sweepstakes. We're not involved in any of these big trades. We weren't in the lottery. And so we're kind of like this forgotten team. And I think our team is going to be very motivated to prove like, hey, we belong in the conversation with, being one of the top teams in this league. And we're going to establish our identity, and we're going to be a very fun team to cheer for and to get behind.
Yeah, I was going to say, I told Facci this on the podcast, that if you guys would have made the Zubac trade in July or June, everybody would be talking about the Pacers right there in contention. But because you guys did it in February, it's kind of, slipped under the radar a little bit. And now it's just more motivation for this team to prove that, 2 years ago, that was not a fluke run. It was not just some happenstance. This is a team that's ready to win. So, Chad, we do appreciate your time. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off? I know you've been talking a lot, so I do appreciate that.
No, I always enjoy coming on and talk with you guys, and I appreciate you guys sticking with us and all of our fans sticking with us. I know I've said this before, but to see our building full, last year it was really heartwarming for just, our front office, our ownership, our entire organization, our players and our team, to know that, our fans gave us some grace last year going through what we went through. And we hope we can, get everybody healthy and reward them for sticking with us through what was a really challenging year. And, for you guys from, the media standpoint, for being fair, very fair to us. We understand, hey, this business is about winning games, and when you don't win, you're going to be, criticized for it. But I always respect what you guys do as far as, promoting the team, telling the stories of our players, because we really have a great group of guys that I think if people knew kind of them on another layer, they'd really be even more fans of our group. And I don't know, I'm just excited for the season to start. It was a long season. You want to put it behind you, and I'm really anxious to get going with this group and see what this group looks like.
Well said. Can't wait to see the squad back out there. I'm not talking end of the season. I'm not talking summer league or preseason. I want that Pacers team back that we saw come, within 2 quarters of winning the NBA championship. So, Chad, thanks again for coming back on the show. We always appreciate having you on, and we can't wait until the next time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your summer.
You too.